everyone, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at something I think is super interesting.
Yeah.
It's all about how we experience reality.
Yep, absolutely.
We're diving into this article by Shimon Edelman called Reality is in the Eye of the Beholder.
Right.
From the MIT Press Reader. And I don't know about you, but this article kind of blew my mind a little bit.
Yeah, definitely thought-provoking for sure.
Yeah, Edelman comes out swinging right off the bat.
Yeah.
Saying we're all basically living a lie.
Kind of a bold statement to start with.
Well, hold on a second.
But when you really think about it,
Yeah.
it's fascinating how he breaks it down, inside our own heads. It's always dark. There's no light, no colors, just our brains trying to make sense of all these signals it's getting.
Right.
And yet we experience this incredibly vivid world full of color detail sounds.
Right.
So how do we get from that darkness to all that richness?
Yeah, right.
Well, Edelman says our brains are essentially creating a virtual reality.
Yeah.
It's a simulation based on what our senses are telling us.
So it's like our brains are basically like a VR headset.
Exactly.
And it's not that what we see is wrong. It's that our brains are constructing it for us.
Exactly. And that's not a bad thing.
Right.
It's actually a really important feature. It's how our brains evolved to handle the overwhelming amount of information out there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, imagine if we had to process every single detail of everything we saw, heard, smelled. It would be
Oh my gosh, yeah.
way too much. We need a simplified version of reality to function.
Totally. It's like if I see a car coming at me,
Yeah.
I don't need to know the physics of light and color.
Yeah.
I just need to know, hey, red car coming at me.
Exactly. Our brains have evolved to give us the information we need to survive and thrive.
Okay, that makes sense. But then Edelman takes things a step further
He does.
with this concept of Umwelten,
Yeah.
which is like saying that each species has its own unique bubble of perception.
It's like a custom-made reality tailored to their senses and their way of life.
Okay, so give me an example of this welt thing, because I'm kind of struggling to picture it.
Okay, imagine a simple barn. You've got a human, a dog, a bat, an owl, maybe some mice all hanging out in this barn.
Okay.
The human sees the wooden beams, the hay bales, maybe some dust in the sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
The dog, on the other hand, is experiencing a whole symphony of smells, picking up on traces of other animals, things we can't even detect.
Okay.
And then you've got the bat.
Now, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Bats can't even see, right?
Well, they see using sound.
What does that even mean?
It's called echolocation. They send out these high-pitched clicks that bounce off everything and create a detailed soundscape.
Whoa.
They can see the texture of a moth's wing, the tiny movements of an insect.
No way.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So they're literally living in a world built on sound.
Exactly. And that's Edelman's point. What we perceive as one reality is actually a multitude of realities all happening at the same time.
That's crazy. So like the owl with its silent flight and night vision, it's experiencing a totally different barn than those mice scurrying around in the dark.
It's like 6 different versions of reality all playing out in the same space.
Okay, so if all these creatures are experiencing the same barn in such different ways, how can we ever know, what the real barn even is?
That's the big question, right? And Edelman suggests that maybe there isn't a single real world, at least not in the way we normally think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. Is it really dark at night?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Not for a bat or an owl?
True.
Is air thick? A bird zipping through the sky might say yes.
I guess so.
And is water wet? Not if you're a duck gliding across the surface.
You got a point there.
Our idea of objective reality might just be a very human-centric view.
That's mind-blowing. It's like we're all trapped in these little sensory bubbles, and we only get these tiny glimpses of what's outside.
And you know what's even more mind-blowing? Edelman says it's not just different creatures that have these different realities. Even within our own species, our realities can shift.
Wait, really? Like how?
Think about it. You see a rock formation, depending on your mindset. You might see a face, a tool, or just a random pile of rocks.
Okay.
Or how about this? Have you ever noticed how a hill seems steeper when you're tired and hungry?
You're saying the hill doesn't actually change? It's just how I perceive it?
That's exactly it. Our perception is constantly being shaped by our experiences, our goals, our emotions, even our physical state.
So it's not just that other creatures have different realities, it's that our own reality is always changing like a kaleidoscope.
Exactly.
Oh, whoa, this is making me question everything I thought I knew.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that reality is super subjective and our brains are constantly filtering things and,
Right.
constructing our experience. But where does science fit into all this? Can science help us, like, get closer to the truth?
That's a great question, and it's something Edelman tackles head on. He argues that while science is amazing for understanding how we perceive the world,
Uh-huh.
it might not be able to give us a definitive answer on ultimate truth.
Wait, but isn't that, like, the whole point of science? To uncover the secrets of the universe and.
It is, but even our most successful scientific theories
Yeah.
are still models, representations of reality, not reality itself.
Okay.
Think about quantum mechanics, a really powerful theory,
Yeah.
but it still struggles with the question of whether an electron is a wave or a particle.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
It's one of those
It's
super confusing,
modern.
mind-bending concepts, and Edelman's saying maybe it doesn't even matter.
Hmm.
What matters is that the theory works, that it helps us understand and predict things.
So instead of getting hung up on finding the right answer, we should focus on understanding how our perceptions work and using that knowledge.
Exactly.
That's actually kind of freeing, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. It's like acknowledging that we have these tools and we can use them to make sense of our experience.
I like that.
And speaking of tools, Edelman gives another great example of how our perception shapes reality color.
Okay.
He uses a banana.
Okay, so we all see a banana as yellow, right? What's so tricky about that?
Well, Edelman points out that color isn't actually a property of the banana itself.
What?
It's created by our visual system, how our eyes and brains interact with the light reflecting off the banana.
So you're saying the banana itself isn't yellow?
It doesn't possess the color yellow. The yellowness is something our minds create.
Yeah.
The banana absorbs certain wavelengths of light, reflects others, and we interpret those reflected wavelengths as yellow.
It really makes you wonder how much of what we call reality is actually just our brain's interpretation.
Exactly. It's like we're all artists painting our own picture of the world based on the limited information our senses provide.
And if everyone's brain is constructing reality a little differently, that means everyone's experiencing their own unique version of the world.
It's like we're all living in our own custom-made movies.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point. Edelman makes the influence of purpose, experience, and state on perception.
Right. Like how the hill looks steeper when we're tired,
Yeah.
or how that rock formation might look like a face or a tool, depending on what you're looking for.
So our past experiences, our goals, our emotions are all filtering and shaping how we see things.
It's like we're each carrying around these invisible lenses that color everything we experience.
Wow. So if we accept that reality is subjective, do that mean we're all just doomed to misunderstand each other?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore further in our next deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks, because this is just the beginning of a very trippy journey.
Yeah, things are about to get even wilder.
But hey, that's the beauty of exploring the human mind, right?
Absolutely. Always something new to discover. That's a great question, and it makes me think about this thing I've noticed with swimming.
Yeah.
You know how when you jump in a pool in the winter, it feels freezing?
Huh.
But in the summer, it's like refreshingly cool.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I swim laps year-round in an indoor pool,
Okay.
and I swear the water feels way colder in the winter, even though the temperature is always the same.
But the water temperature is objectively the same, right? So is it really just your perception changing or what?
That's the thing. The thermometer might say 78 degrees year-round, but my experience of it is totally different.
Wow.
And get this, if I know it's going to be cold and I focus on how good I'll feel after the swim, it doesn't feel as bad.
So you're saying your mindset can actually change how you physically experience something like temperature?
It seems that way. It's
Yeah.
wild how powerful our expectations and mental frameworks can be.
Yeah, that's really making me think.
Right. We're not just passively taking in information. We're actively shaping our experience.
Okay, so this is all fascinating, but it also raises a big question for me.
Yeah.
If reality is this subjective, if our brains are constantly filtering and interpreting everything, where does science fit in? Can science even help us get to some kind of objective truth?
That's where Edelman gets even more interesting.
Okay.
He argues that science is incredible for understanding how we perceive the world,
Yeah.
but it can't necessarily answer the question of ultimate truth.
But isn't that the whole point of science? To discover truth? To uncover those secrets of the universe?
It is, but Edelman points out that even our most successful scientific theories are still just models.
Okay.
They're representations of reality, not reality itself. He uses quantum mechanics as an example. It's a super successful theory.
Right.
But even quantum mechanics grapples with this question of, is an electron a wave or a particle?
Yeah, I remember that from physics class. It's one of those things that, like,
It's tough to wrap your head around.
totally.
And Edelman says maybe it doesn't even matter.
Really?
What matters is that the theory works. It helps us understand and predict phenomena.
So it's not about finding the right answer. It's about understanding the tools we have and using them. Huh? That's actually pretty liberating.
It is. It's like acknowledging that we have these tools and we can use them to make sense of our experience.
I like that. And you know what else I like?
What's that?
This next example Edelman gives about color.
Oh, yeah.
He uses a banana.
A classic.
Right. We all see a banana as yellow.
Right.
So what's the big deal?
Well, Edelman points out that color isn't actually an inherent property of the banana.
Wait, what?
The color is created by our visual system, how our eyes and brains interpret the light reflecting off the banana.
So you're telling me the banana itself isn't actually yellow?
It doesn't possess the color yellow.
Yeah.
The yellowness is something our minds create.
Whoa.
The banana absorbs certain wavelength of light, reflects others, and our brains interpret those specific wavelengths as yellow.
This is blowing my mind. How much of what we call reality is actually just our brain's interpretation?
It really is amazing, isn't it? It's like we're all artists painting our own picture of the world based on this limited sensory information we have.
And if everyone's brain is constructing reality a little differently, that means everyone's experiencing their own unique version of the world.
It's like we're all living in our own custom-made movies.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, how purpose, experience, and state all influence our perception.
Right, like how the hill looks steeper when we're tired.
Yeah.
Or how that rock formation might look like a face or a tool, depending on what you're looking for.
So our past experiences, our goals, our emotions, they're all filtering and shaping how we see things.
It's like we're each carrying around a set of invisible lenses that color everything we experience.
Okay, so we've talked about how reality is subjective
Uh-huh.
and how our brains are constructing our own unique versions of the world.
Yes.
So does that mean we're all just doomed to misunderstand each other?
That's a really important question, and it's something we need to think about carefully. It's not about saying that there's no truth or that all opinions are equal.
Right.
It's about recognizing that everyone is experiencing the world in their own way. Okay?
And being open to understanding those different perspectives.
I see what you mean. So even though our individual realities might be different,
Yeah,
we can still try to connect with each other.
exactly. And that's where empathy comes in.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where empathy comes in. If we can acknowledge that everyone else is experiencing their own unique version of reality, just as we are, it opens up this space for understanding and connection.
Okay, yeah.
It lets us approach disagreements or conflicts with more curiosity and compassion.
So instead of assuming someone is wrong or, being difficult, we can try to see the world through their eyes to understand how their experiences have shaped their beliefs.
Exactly. It's like that saying, be kind for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
Right.
But in this case, it's like, be understanding for everyone you meet is experiencing a different reality.
I like that. It's a good reminder that even when we disagree with someone, their perspective is still valid, even if it's different from our own.
And that shift from being right to understanding can make a huge difference, especially when things get heated. It's true. It makes you realize how often we get stuck in our own heads, so convinced that our way of seeing things is the only way.
Yeah, we all do it.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener.
I'm glad to hear that. And I think that's one of the most valuable things about Edelman's work, challenging us to step outside of our own little bubble and recognize that our experience is subjective.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Edelman's ideas, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that while the search for objective truth might be elusive, the journey of exploring our own perceptions and understanding the perceptions of others is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
It's a journey that requires curiosity, open-mindedness, and a willingness to challenge those assumptions we all have.
But it's a journey that ultimately leads to a richer, more compassionate and connected experience of the world.
Absolutely.
And maybe it can even help us understand each other better across those divides that seem so big sometimes.
Beautifully said. And with that thought, we invite you, our listener, to continue the exploration. Step outside of your comfort zone, challenge your own perceptions, seek to understand the world through the eyes of others.
Who knows what you might discover?
Exactly.
This has been a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to talk about the mysteries of the mind.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of ideas.